Game Week 7 is here and the transfer extravaganza continues. So no matter what kind of players you're targeting this week, we've got all of the data covered in this week's Buy, Sell, Keep, Avoid. If you're new to the series, this is how it works. The video is split into two parts, the first of which we will have a look at those players you may already have in your team and which ones you should keep and which ones you should sell. After that, we'll be looking at the players to buy and which players maybe you should avoid. Players are tier listed with the best players at the top and the worst ones at the bottom. So going position by position, we're going to start off in the forward section, and those kind of forwards you may already have in your team. And I think there are a few players here that I think are probably worth keeping right now. And we'll start off with Gyökeres, who obviously maybe hasn't had the best few game weeks in the world, but with West Ham at home up next, it's very difficult to suggest to sell him. It's still a little bit of a mystery who will be the penalty taker for Arsenal, but I think Gyökeres still has a very good chance of that. Mateta, another penalty taker. Actually, all three of the keeps are penalty takers, but Mateta actually played pretty well against Liverpool. Unlucky not to score in that game. He couldn't have really come much closer without scoring, kind of hitting the inside of the post. Had another really big chance saved by Alisson. We know what Alisson is like as a one-on-one goalkeeper, which did keep Mateta at bay. But actually, Crystal Palace have been super impressive so far this season. So Everton away next. I don't think it's the worst fixture in the world. After that, maybe a little more tricky in Bournemouth and Arsenal. But in general, for 7.5 million, there aren't too many other options in the forward position right now. So you may as well keep him. And as for Ollie Watkins, if you've managed to hold on to him this far, first of all, congratulations on the goal in Game Week 6 against Fulham. But Burnley at home is, I think we all accept, is the best home fixture you can have all season right now. So if you have held on to Ollie Watkins so far, I do think it makes sense to hold on to him for just one more wet game week, now that he has maybe a bit of goal scoring form, see what he can produce, and then after that, we think about switching away when we get those more difficult fixtures against the likes of Spurs, Man City, and Liverpool. On to monitors, and Joao Pedro is a player we need to keep an eye on. No shots in his last 4 games now in all competitions, which is a little bit worrying, and maybe this Liverpool game is an interesting jumping off point. Now that said, Chelsea do have some good fixtures coming up, so if you think Joao Pedro can be fit for the games kind of from game week 8 onwards, I still think he is well worth keeping, but he's going to be a high monitor for me. But yeah, it's a difficult one. He is carrying a little bit of an injury, but he seems to be playing 90 minutes every game regardless. Could he be benched for the Liverpool game? That's probably what I'm thinking with Joao Pedro in my team right now, holding on to him for some good fixtures in the future, but he's certainly not as much of a keep as he maybe was a couple of weeks ago. Richarlison, if you have him, is probably worth holding on to for one more game week, but rotation risk is coming very, very soon. Actually, Richarlison has only scored 1 Premier League goal since game week 1, which is a little bit concerning, particularly as Kolo Muani should be back this game week, and after the international break in game week 8, we're also expecting Solanke to be back as well. So there's a couple of strikers coming back, maybe going to be damaging Richarlison's minutes potential, and that worries me a little bit. But Leeds away next, if you think he's going to start this game, which he probably should do, then he's going to be fine for this game week. After that, I think the concerns will begin. In terms of Isak and Ekitike, now that they are both available for seemingly the first time this season, it is going to be really interesting to see how Liverpool sets up, and therefore it's difficult to make an exact judgment on either of these players. They are both so very expensive, but would I sell them? Probably not, even if the Chelsea away fixture is not ideal. I think maybe giving it 1 or 2 more game weeks to see what their situation is probably needed before giving a real good judgment on these players. So yeah, very, very difficult to judge those Liverpool strikers right now, so that's why I've put them in the monitor section. As for sells, Jared Bowen I think is going to be a pretty easy sell. A good time to sell him away against Arsenal if you do still have him in your squad, despite some okay fixtures after that. He's just not really providing value for money. The underlying numbers are not particularly good here. 0.71 XG, 0.46 XA so far this season. I am recording this video before the game against Everton for West Ham in game week 6, but I don't imagine that's going to change too much in one game in isolation. Chris Wood, another good opportunity to sell him at this moment. Away against Newcastle, we know Newcastle have been a really tough fixture, and Wood obviously very much out of form at the moment, seems to be dropping further and further out of form, and we don't even know if he is going to be in favour going into the future, as Forest do have other options in the striker position. So Ange Postecoglou Forest not suiting Chris Wood so far. I would be very concerned, and with these difficult fixtures, this could be a good hopping scraping off points. And Beto, another player I will be a little bit worried about. His minutes have been very, very mixed. I think the next 3 fixtures, if you are an attacker, Crystal Palace, Man City away, and Spurs, even Sunderland away, these are not particularly good fixtures for a forward. So there are some other cheap forward options you might consider going for right now, and maybe Beto can be sacrificed in order to get them in. As for your midfielders, I think Xavi Simons, despite some, disappointment so far, let's be totally honest, I think it's very difficult to sell him ahead of this Leeds game. I don't think he'll be in too much danger of rotation. Obviously, Spurs have spent a lot of money for him, and it's just about getting him into the team, seeing how he's going to really suit the team and find the best of him, which maybe hasn't happened so far. But Leeds away, Aston Villa at home, even Everton away and Chelsea at home, this is not the worst run of fixtures for a Xavi Simons, so I think he is worth holding on to, just kind of trying to hold your bottle on him a little bit. Set piece taker as well, which is very, very useful. Reinders has been maybe a little bit disappointing in the underlying numbers, considering he has started all 6 games and is only on 0.73 XG and 0.49 XA, but we have to take his price into consideration in all of this, and actually value for money wise, you can't really knock Reinders at this kind of price. It's really, really cheap, and the fixtures continue to be pretty good for Man City over the next 3, so really no strong need to sell him right now at that kind of price. Even if you don't fancy him, he's quite nice as a little bench option as well, but I think he's perfectly playable, certainly in the next 3 fixtures at least. And Bruno Fernandes has been the ultimate troll so far this season. Another penalty miss at the weekend. Do I think Bruno is going to lose his penalties for Manchester United? Well, it's difficult to say for sure, but my current feeling is probably not. I'm not 100% certain about that one at all, but 3.4 XG, obviously the penalties have a lot to do with that, and 0.99 XA, and yet only 2 goals to show for it and no assists. This has been one of the swingiest players in the entirety of FPL. Real negative variance on Bruno, particularly when you consider his defensive contributions, how close he is getting to defensive contributions, another 11 in game week 6, which meant he just missed out on the DC points as well. So yeah, really disappointing, but I think a lot of the positive signs seem to be there on him as an individual player. Sunderland at home next. Could that be an interesting game? A home fixture against Sunderland, I think, is a lot better than an away fixture against Sunderland. There is definitely a lot of debate around Bruno. One thing I will definitely agree with is that he is probably not worth 9 million, but I think a lot of people are struggling to spend their money right now. I certainly know that I have quite a lot of money in the bank, not really sure when to spend it. I wonder if you could maybe wait for 1 more week and see if Palmer is going to be available for game week 8 and making some kind of switch Bruno to Palmer next week potentially, or waiting for 1 more weeks of information on Saka, maybe making a switch that way. I just can't see many strong reasons to sell Bruno. I don't think you can do too much better than him right now if you don't take price into consideration. If you are struggling for money, I get it. Maybe he could be a sell. Monitor and Burmo, he's been doing really well on the underlying numbers all the way up until game week 6, where that was a little bit more worrying for him. So I wonder if there is a slight dip in the form here of Mbermo. I say form. He hasn't actually produced anything, well, very much. He's got that 1 goal, but the underlying numbers were good up until recently. So maybe dipping down a little bit in our kind of opinions, I suppose, but definitely not a must-sell player. Then we come to Gakpo. Away against Chelsea is not the greatest fixture. His underlying numbers are significantly worse than some of these other players of a similar price, slightly above him on the list, such as Bruno and Mbermo, which is some cause for concern. Obviously, there is some rotation concern for Gakpo as well. I don't know how big the concern is, but with more and more players available for Liverpool, we kind of have to wonder, where does Gakpo fit in all of this? Is he going to be a main starting player? So he's got to be a monitor really at best. Mo Salah not providing value for money, blanking in game week 6. I know he didn't score his usual 90th minute goal, but this week, it is maybe time to think about switching off him, particularly if you don't have Haaland in your team yet. Salah is the best way to kind of raise the funds to kind of get Haaland into your team. So definitely a monitor at best. I don't think he is a must sell though, and it has to be said that Salah's underlying numbers are actually beginning to improve a little bit. But again, when Ekatike is available, Isak's available, how do they all fit in? It is so difficult to make a judgment on these Liverpool attackers. I'm struggling, guys. I don't know about you. With Cole Palmer, I'm going to put him in the monitor. I don't think he is a sell, even though he is going to be out for Game Week 7. I wonder if it is possible for some people to maybe just bench him for Game Week 7, and then if he's available for Game Week 8 after the international break, then we've got some nice fixtures for him at that point. So right now, it's difficult. If you still own Palmer, I would definitely consider making an attempt to keep him. Maybe just playing 4 at the back this week, which seems to be working pretty well for people. I don't think he's a must-sell, though, particularly as we're only looking at one more game out for him. And after that, I think a lot of people will actually be looking to buy him. You might actually find yourself ahead of the crowd. That said, if you do need to fund other moves, maybe Palmer is pretty easy to sacrifice, considering we know he's not going to play in Game Week 7, and we can't even be sure he's going to play in Game Week 8 either. Florian Wirtz still going to be a sell for me, just not providing anything for the lofty price tag that you do pay for him. Gibbs White, with the difficult fixtures for Nottingham Forest, I think Forest players in general are going to drop into the sell category this week. And with Gibbs White, certainly not providing value for money. 7.5 million. It is a lot to be spending on Gibbs White. So if you did take a punt on him, it might be time to maybe let that one go. And Brendan Johnson remains in the sell category. I know a lot of people picked him up earlier on in the season, but no starts in the Premier League in 3 now. We have to probably expect that he's not going to start in Game Week 7 either. Maybe he does, but is that a risk you really want to take? For me, probably not. Looking at these defenders, and Calafiori is not a player I'd be looking to sell this week. I know Gabriel looks much more appetizing right now, but with these fixtures, as long as you think Calafiori will continue to play, he is worth holding on to with this amazing run of fixtures for Arsenal with West Ham, Fulham, Crystal Palace, and Burnley. You imagine that Arsenal could definitely keep clean sheets in 3 out of 4 of these games, and hopefully Calafiori is going to be able to play those games for you. Well, we will talk about Calafiori when it comes to buying players, which I think is slightly different. If I'm buying an Arsenal defender right now, it's probably not going to be Calafiori. But if you've already kind of made your bet there, he's not a player I'd be looking to sell right now. Van der Ven, I don't think it's been amazing. Looking at the defensive contributions, he is on the low side with just 32 so far this season. When you compare him to someone like Virgil, who is directly below him on this list, it is really a big difference there. So therefore, is Van der Ven going to be worthwhile in the long term? I don't know, but again, you're not going to sell him against Leeds. It is a really good fixture for him, and Leeds have been one of the weakest attacks in the Premier League so far, and we do expect Spurs to definitely have a very strong chance of a clean sheet in Game Week 7. So Van der Ven, worth keeping, not a priority sell at all. And I don't think Virgil is a priority sell either right now. Still doing well for defensive contributions, maybe not offering as much in attack as we would hope, but you never know when that's going to turn around. And Liverpool are going to be one of the strongest defenses in the Premier League, even in the more difficult fixtures. So probably worth holding on to Virgil. Chalobah is a bit of a Palmer situation. I don't think I'd be looking to sell Chalobah. Yes, he is going to be suspended against Liverpool in Game Week 7, but were you planning on playing Chalobah in Game Week 7 against Liverpool anyway? The answer is probably not. So therefore, can you hold on to him? Wait for Game Week 8 against Nottingham Forest, where again, the fixtures start to look much better for Chelsea. Forest and Sunderland, these are good fixtures for a defender. Decent defensive contributions so far for this guy. He's been pretty good in attack as well. So yeah, just bench him for Liverpool and we'll go again in Game Week 8 if you do have him in your squad. Estev is going to go in monitor, doing really well for the defensive contributions. The fixtures are pretty decent for him, but I definitely appreciate that some people might be looking to make an upgrade here, switching to another defender. So Estev is sacrificable in my opinion, but definitely not a priority sell. Pedro Porro, some rotation concern, but with a rest in Game Week 6, does that increase his chances of playing in Game Week 7? I'm not sure. Spurs fans, you will have to let me know. We did appreciate that in the midweek, Pedro Porro did play before Game Week 6, so there was going to be higher risk of rotation. So I guess we'll see what happens throughout this week and whether we think Pedro Porro is likely to play against Leeds or not. But even though not great value for money, 5.6, not much attacking threat, not very good for defensive contributions. Again, can we just wait out this Leeds away fixture before selling him? Hopefully. but not definitely. Cucurella is also on here. He is a player who is definitely not providing value for money either right now. Their cheaper defenders are just doing better. And with Liverpool at home the next fixture, maybe he is a player who is slightly more sacrificable than someone like Chalobah, who is offering more in defensive contributions, a little bit more in attack, and also is significantly cheaper. So Cucurella and Chalobah, maybe not quite the same for me. If you don't have an Arsenal defender, but you do have Cucurella, then definitely that is a move you could consider making. Other players to sacrifice are gotta be these Nottingham Forest defenders. If you've got Williams, Milenkovic, if you've still got Murillo or Aina in your team, this is a pretty good week to hop off these guys. Newcastle away, followed by Chelsea, Bournemouth, and Manchester United. How many clean sheets are we expecting in this one? Well, maybe one against Manchester United, but that's all the way in game week 10. So in the immediate term, these picks seem to be falling quickly out of favor within FPL. So yeah, definitely players you could remove. And Livramento, he has not been confirmed out yet, but the injury, unfortunately for him, did look pretty bad at the weekend, having to be stretchered off. So it looks like Livramento could be out for at least a few weeks, maybe even a few months. It does not look great right now. We will have to wait for updates to find out for sure the extent of the injury, but I think it makes sense to sell Livramento this week. Maybe wait until confirmation on the injury, but yeah, it's not looking too good. If you do have Livramento, probably going to be a sell. And by the way, guys, if you are enjoying this episode of Buy, Sell, Keep, Avoid, please do drop a like. It massively helps out the channel so much. I do really appreciate it. And feel free to subscribe if you want to follow along with these FPL tips every single game week. Moving on to the buys. In the forward section, we have got Mr. Erling Haaland. I don't think I need to convince you guys on this one at this point. 28 shots, 27 in the box, 13 big chances, 7.37 XG. This is crazy stuff, and the good fixtures keep coming for him. There's absolutely no doubt that you need to have Erling Haaland in your FPL team right now. No further comments. Gyökeres is definitely a player to consider buying ahead of this West Ham at home fixture. We've got Burnley coming up as well for Arsenal, so there's some really nice opportunities in the very near future to try and get some points from the Arsenal striker. And I do think, even though he has been disappointing, he is gradually getting a little bit better. It's kind of starting to work a little bit more for Arsenal and Gyökeres. It's taken a little bit of time to try and bed him into the team properly, but, you know, as an Arsenal fan, I feel pretty optimistic about Gyökeres, but, of course, maybe that is my Arsenal bias talking there. But against West Ham at home, you've got to say there's an opportunity here. Voltemada looks pretty decent as well. 2 goals so far, and although he has been overperforming, I think the fixtures coming up are good enough that he can continue to get a few goals here and there for the mighty Newcastle. 7.1 million, not such a bad price either. So if you fancy going differential and you're looking for a new forward, I think Voltemada is definitely a player worth considering. Looking through the monitors, I don't know if I would be jumping to buy Mateta, but he's got to be up there in the better forwards in FPL right now. So we'll leave him right there. A player we've already spoken about in today's video, just like Joao Pedro. There are some concerns around Joao Pedro. Not sure I'd be rushing to buy him right now. So after that, we really are looking at those slightly cheaper forwards like Isidore and Thiago. Now, it's probably a better jumping on point for Isidore at Sunderland because we do have that Manchester United away game followed by a Wolves at home game. As for Thiago, Igor Thiago at Brentford, we've got Man City as the Game Week 7 fixture, and we even have Liverpool in Game Week 9 as well, Palace in Game Week 10. So these are not the best fixtures for Brentford outside of Game Week 8, so there is maybe some concern around him there. But both of these players look like they're going to be providing really nice value for money and could even compete with some of the 7.5 million guys, judging by their underlying numbers so far this season, judging by how they've played. You just need to find the right moment to buy these guys, and looking at things right now, it looks like a slightly better moment to buy Isidore rather than Thiago. But with these cheap forwards, you are always taking a bit of a risk, so be aware before you go for them. Avoid Richarlison for the very reasons mentioned earlier on in the video. We have got Kolo Muani coming back, we've got Solanke coming back in Game Week 8. There is going to be rotation risk for Richarlison in the very near future, so if you haven't already got Richarlison in your team, he's probably not going to be a player to buy now. You may have missed your chance on this one. Maybe Game Week 7 is the last chance, but yeah, I would be really worried before going for him. And Isak and Ekitike, until we get more information about this Liverpool attack, I sound like a broken record on this one, I know, but I just cannot find any confidence to buy Liverpool attackers right now. If you don't already have them, you're probably not going to buy them, particularly Game Week 7, where Chelsea away is maybe not the best fixture in the world. Like, it is a huge risk. maybe the risk is even larger against a team like Chelsea. But hey, we'll see what happens. I know Chelsea have not been in the best form over the last couple of weeks, so it remains to be seen what will happen there. But that's kind of the point. I don't know, so it's difficult to recommend these guys. Looking through these midfielders, Semenyo continues to put up some good underlying numbers. Yet another attacking return for him in game week 7, and he did miss out on some defensive contribution points, but 50 so far, 50 defensive contributions in 6 games is very, very good for a player who is as attacking as Semenyo. It's a very unique combination to have a player with both of these assets, that attacking potential as well as the defensive contribution potential. So that's kind of what we've seen so far from him. Semenyo obviously going to be on penalties when Kluivert is not on the pitch. When Kluivert is on the pitch for Bournemouth, it's a little bit more of a toss-up. The fixtures are not perfect, but form trumps fixtures, and Bournemouth have been a phenomenal team so far this season. But I'm sure most of you guys have got Semenyo in at this point. If you haven't, well, he is there for the taking for you. Ismail Assar is probably going to be my favourite 6.5-ish midfielder right now. He's down to 6.4 million, actually, and I've always been a huge fan of Ismail Assar, maybe too much of a fan. It's such a shame he got injured a few weeks ago, but back again against Liverpool with another goal. He seems to have a variety of ways of scoring goals, whether it's those tap-ins from those corners, being in the right position, or on the counter-attack, he finds a way. And Sarr is also a pretty good player for being relatively fixture-proof. Now, I don't think Everton away is the perfect fixture for Sarr, but actually Bournemouth and Arsenal, even though they look pretty tough on paper, these are the kind of fixtures that Sarr often gets the FPL points in. So I don't think I'll be looking at his fixtures too much. What we do know is in the limited minutes he has played so far this season, he has done very well. His underlying numbers are very good. He's getting a decent amount of big chances. His XG is high. He's ticking a lot of the boxes, and he's now had a price drop, so even better value for money than he was before. And Antony has been really a bit of a sleeper pick so far this season. Doing really well, actually. 12 shots, 4 big chances, 2.16 XG. He has been overperforming that with 4 goals, but generally the underlying data is very strong here, particularly for a cheap guy as little as 5.6 million. He's been the star of Burnley, and I think that's been clear to see since the start of the season, really. Every time I've watched Antony, he looks like the most dangerous guy in that Burnley attack. Fixture's pretty good for Burnley as well, so if you're looking to go for a cheap midfielder, he's probably the way I would go this game week. If you can afford 5.6 million, if that's the kind of money you'd be looking to spend. One more note on Antony. Even though he hasn't been amazing for defensive contribution points yet, he has shown a lot of positive signs and come really close 3 times now. 2 defensive contribution points. I think he's got 11 twice and 10 once. So maybe some defensive contribution points are going to come his way as well. The signs are certainly there for this extra avenue for him to get you some FPL points. Another differential, guys, we've got a few differentials here, is Minter. Very high on the monitor section for me, particularly with Wolves away the next fixture. We know this is a nice fixture for the likes of Minter, but he's been doing pretty well, actually. 1.61 XG, 0.99 XA, pretty decent data here, and 5.9 million, nice cheap price tag for him as well. So if you do fancy him, he's got a couple of attacking returns in the last 2 game weeks. I think that might be able to continue, and I think the price is really good for him as well. So maybe an alternative to Antony if you are looking to go a little bit cheaper here. Saka and Eze, both of these players are going to be monitors for me. No Arsenal bias from me, I'm afraid. It's just very difficult to justify Saka at 9.8 million when he hasn't really proven himself in a long time from an FPL perspective. Let me just make that one very clear. I think he is a wonderful football player, but have we really seen that FPL potential for him? When was the last time we did? We're talking, you know, months and months and months ago, way long ago, maybe even last year as a FPL asset when we're talking about this money to spend on him. So you could take a risk and just say, look, the fixture against West Ham is amazing. I want to take a risk. I think that, you know, good fixtures breed good form, and therefore you could absolutely go for him. But Saka is without a doubt a little bit risky, and, you know, to me, hasn't really proved himself yet. Eze, maybe a similar situation, has got a couple of assists so far, and is taking plenty of shots in fairness, in not a huge amount of minutes for Arsenal either. So therefore, could be considered against West Ham, a little bit cheaper as well, but 7.5 million is still a big amount of money to be spending when there are so many cheaper midfielders who are putting up better numbers, who are, you know, in that hot form already. Would you want to wait for Eze, or would you rather take someone who's already in good form? I guess that's kind of, down to the individual. And Reinders, even though I think he's fine to keep, not really a player I'd be looking to pick up right now. I think there is actually some slightly better cheap options than him. Certainly now that Burnley is out the way, something that worries me about Man City is they are scoring all of these goals, and yet it's Erling Haaland who seems to be getting on the end of every one of them. Man City have so many good attackers, and yet still, it's Erling Haaland dominating the numbers. It's all set up around Haaland right now. So Reinders, a little bit deeper than I had hoped for. Maybe Foden is not particularly helping Reinders. Maybe that changes fixture by fixture. Maybe in the slightly more difficult fixtures, Reinders will have a little bit more freedom to play a little bit further forward as they go with a slightly more defensive setup. But very difficult to say right now. Brentford away, don't know if that is going to be that fixture or not. But 5.8 million is a good price. He's a good player to own. Don't think he'd be the first on my buy list this week. As for those avoids, Enzo is going to go on here, and he has actually done amazingly. I'm really impressed with Enzo so far this season. The underlying data is really, really good for him. However, this is where data does not tell the full story, as Enzo has pretty much clocked up all of his data in the 3 games so far this season where Palmer has not played a minute. So Enzo, when Palmer is not playing, amazing, but when Palmer is playing, Enzo is pretty much putting up 0 shots, 0 key passes, doing very, very little indeed. So a player who thrives without Palmer. Now, Palmer is due to be back in game week 8. Game week 7 is against Liverpool. Is it really worth taking a punt on Enzo for the one game that Palmer isn't available when it's against Liverpool? It is really difficult for me to argue that. So yeah, on the face of it, Enzo looks incredible, but actually when you dig into it, it's really Enzo with versus without Palmer that you have to consider. So maybe my controversial placement of this game week, but Enzo's going to go in a void for me. I guess we'll see what happens there. But look, if Chelsea do well against Liverpool, it's probably going to be a lot to do with Enzo. So I think he could potentially do well against Liverpool if Chelsea do well against Liverpool, which I'm obviously not going to be fully convinced by that. When Palmer's back, he is going to become a very expensive paperweight, I guess, in your FPL team. And we've got Doku in the avoid section. I know he is getting assists at the moment, overperforming, might I add, but it's just that Haaland factor again. I can never be fully sure about any other Man City attacker right now, particularly Doku, who is always going to have some rotation risk attached to him. He has been playing the last few games, started the last 4 games, but early substitutions are maybe a slightly bad sign for him. And we've got Gravenberch. I know it's maybe a little lazy to call him a defensive midfielder, but he is a little bit. I think it's just super, super difficult to recommend a player, even when they are scoring FPL points, when the underlying numbers are so bad. I mean, these are some of the weakest underlying numbers for a midfielder you will see in the game of FPL. 0.37 XG, 0.36 XA. He's basically clocked up 0.7 expected goal involvements, and yet has 4 goal involvements. That is just not sustainable for me whatsoever. Defensive contributions has actually picked up in the last 2 game weeks, but generally speaking, I don't think he is going to be a player to get a huge amount of them. So, yeah, really difficult placement. Some of these players, I know, like, I only put players in the avoid section if people are buying them. I don't put obvious players in the avoid section. You don't need me to tell you to not buy, some midfielder who isn't even playing right now or who is injured. Obviously, you guys know that. We try and include players in this section of the video that, maybe have a little bit of hype around them that maybe I'm not fully convinced by. And I think I've hopefully outlined some ideas as to why I'm not convinced by these players, but obviously I'm open to being to disagreements if you do disagree with me. But you can see I always include this on screen, guys. We have the expected points. So this is calculated based on a player's underlying numbers. Now, the expected points for Gravenberch is just 15 based on his actions on the pitch, and yet he's actually clocked up 35. So it's a huge overperformance there that I just cannot see being sustainable there, unfortunately, for him. Over double the output, which is really quite crazy stuff. Maybe the biggest overperformer in FPL so far this season. But I think we can move on to the defenders. Okay, defenders to buy. Very, very easy. If you don't have Gabriel, get him into your team. Goal threat shown in the Newcastle game. We know that Gabriel is a goal-scoring defender from those set pieces. His defensive contributions are much better than I thought they would be as well. They seem to be improving. 52 so far this season. It's not like the best in the Premier League, but, that's not too bad. The fixtures we know are amazing. I'm going to throw Timber in here as a cheap cheaper alternative with maybe slightly more rotation risk. But Timber has actually looked pretty decent from an attacking threat point of view as well. So if you're happy to take a little bit more of a risk on the minutes, not a huge risk, but a little bit of a risk on the minutes, plus slightly less defensive contributions for that cheaper price, I think it's okay. Senesi, however, is also going to be a buy here. Maybe not as much of a buy as he was last game week, but this game week is still a great jumping on point for the king of defensive contributions in the Premier League and just this insane scoring cheap defender. No reason not to buy him, really. In the monitor, I'm going to go for Dan Burn. Definitely a player to consider. Some defensive contributions, not really too much goal threat. For a guy of his size, you know, we don't often see too much goal threat from him, it has to be said. But the fixtures are good for Newcastle right now, so as an alternative to Arsenal/Senesi, maybe you could go for Newcastle, as they have been such a good defense so far this season. Mark Gahey is actually improving on the defensive contribution, so is improving on my list as well. Now we've got that Liverpool fixture out the way. If you can keep getting those cheeky goals and assists, you never know, could be a decent option for you, but I still do prefer Richards at 4.5. Alderete, probably not going to buy him this game week, but I still think he is the best 4 million defender. If you're on a wild card, I would go for him, but wouldn't be rushing him in if you're using free transfers alone, unless you are desperately trying to downgrade one of your defender to free up some money for maybe a second move this week. Van der Ven, not really a player I'd be looking to buy, but I don't think he's the worst either. Munoz, not just really providing any value for money at the moment. 5.6 million, not really much there for defensive contributions. Hasn't really been doing as well in attack as we had have hoped maybe. Are the fixtures good enough? Maybe not. So for that price, you're going to probably go for the other Crystal Palace defenders right now. Calafiori and Virgil, both players I would keep, but if you don't already have them, I would not be looking at these guys. I would be looking more towards the other Arsenal defenders rather than Calafiori and, you know, a Gabriel or a Timber instead of Virgil as well. Maybe even a Dan Burn instead of Virgil if you are already kind of loaded up on your Arsenal. And let's wrap up with the goalkeepers. If you have Sanchez and Vicario, I still think there's good enough fixtures left for them that they are not really worth trading out. If you have Sanchez, you probably still have your wild card available, so I would probably just hold on to Sanchez until like a game week 13 wild card, something like that. There are still some good fixtures coming up. If you're looking to sell, obviously the only goalkeepers I would really look to sell would be a goalkeeper who isn't playing, such as Trafford. But with Alisson at 5.5 million, he is providing very little value for money right now, and Chelsea away is maybe a good hopping off point for him. I wouldn't blame people if they went Alisson to Raya, for example, something like that. Speaking of Raya, he is the top goalkeeper to buy still. Petrovic, if you want to go a little bit cheaper, so no change there. Donnarumma, still not feeling him for his price tag. 5.6 million for what he offers is not quite good enough for me when you have Raya right there. And Henderson, probably not the time to buy him necessarily. Crystal Palace defenders seem to be most benefiting from defensive contributions, and Henderson doesn't get defensive contributions because he's a goalkeeper. But those were all of the players I want to talk about in today's video. If I missed anyone out, please do let me know in the comments and I will rate them buy, sell, keep, or avoid. If you enjoyed this one, drop a like, do subscribe if you're new around here, and I will see you tomorrow for yet another video. See you later, mates. Bye bye.